Have you ever been in a situation where someone's racist comments just make you feel sick to your stomach? But what if someone didn't just let it slide? What if they stood up and their response shocked everyone around them? That's exactly what happened when a white woman insulted a black man in a grocery store. And trust me, you won't believe how it ended. It was supposed to be just another day at the grocery store. The shelves were stocked, the lines were long, and everyone was just going about their business. But things took a turn when a white woman with no hesitation decided to unleash a cruel racist remark at a black man who was minding his own business. What she didn't know, however, was that her insult was about to be met with a response that would leave everyone stunned. Keep watching to see what happened next. It was a busy Saturday afternoon at a local grocery store, the kind of place where everyone's focused on getting in and out with their shopping. The shelves were stocked, the hum of conversations filled the aisles, and the air smelled of fresh produce. But something was off that day. The man in question, a well-dressed black man, stood in line quietly minding his own business, his shopping cart filled with the usual necessities. He was like anyone else at that moment, just another person trying to get through their day without any drama. But he wasn't prepared for what would come next. At the checkout counter, a white woman stood a few feet behind him, eyeing his every move. She had already been making small, irritated comments to the cashier about the lines being too long, the prices too high, and how people weren't moving fast enough. The kind of person who clearly had no patience for anyone around her, and that became very clear when her eyes landed on him. He had no idea why she decided to focus her attention on him. Maybe she felt entitled, or maybe her racial prejudices had simply bubbled to the surface in a place where she felt she could speak freely. Whatever the reason, it didn't matter. The woman with no hesitation or shame started to make an overtly racist comment about the man. With a smirk on her face, she muttered loud enough for everyone in line to hear people like, "You don't belong in this store. You don't even know how to shop properly." The words were venomous, dripping with hate and disgust. It wasn't a quiet insult either. She made sure everyone heard it. She wasn't just insulting him. She was making a statement, a public declaration of her belief that he was beneath her. The other shoppers in the store could feel the tension rise, but no one did anything. Some of them shifted uncomfortably, casting quick glances at the man. Others pretended not to hear, hoping the whole thing would blow over. It was that moment of discomfort that always seems to happen when something racist is said in public. People are aware that something wrong is happening, but they don't know how to respond, so they just stay silent. The black man still standing in line had remained completely calm. His back was straight, his hands still resting on the handle of his cart. His face didn't show anger or frustration. It wasn't that he wasn't upset, he just knew he had a choice in how he could respond. The woman, however, seemed oblivious to the gravity of her words. She thought she had won some kind of small victory, believing that with her words she had put him in his place. What she didn't realize, however, was that her actions had set the stage for something far bigger than a simple insult. As the man stood there, the silent tension in the air seemed to grow. It was as though everyone in the store was holding their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Would he let it slide, or would he stand up for himself? And if he did, would anyone else stand with him, or would they just continue to ignore the injustice that was happening right in front of their eyes? The woman had no idea that she had made a mistake that she would soon regret. But the question remained, how would the black man react? Would he stay silent, or would he find a way to make his voice heard? As the minutes ticked by, the tension in the grocery store grew. The white woman stood there still smirking, convinced her racist comment had landed. She was likely expecting some kind of reaction from the black man, a confrontation, maybe a retort, but he stayed eerily calm. He didn't even flinch when her words hit him. The silence between them seemed to stretch on forever, almost unbearable to the onlookers who were now fully aware of what had just transpired. The cashier behind the counter looked up briefly, noticing the exchange, but unsure whether to intervene. The other shoppers, who had momentarily frozen in place, awkwardly shifted their eyes, not wanting to be caught in the middle of the confrontation. It was as if everyone in the store was hoping someone else would handle the situation, but nobody wanted to make the first move. And while the tension in the store seemed to hang thick in the air, the man didn't react. His face was unreadable, his body language calm and composed. To the onlookers, it might have seemed like the man had taken the insult without a fight. But anyone who was paying attention could tell that this wasn't passivity. It was control. He wasn't letting her words get to him. And that in itself was powerful. The way he stood there unwavering was a message in and of itself: you can say whatever you want, but it won't affect me. The woman meanwhile grew more agitated, as if she was waiting for him to snap. But when she saw no sign of retaliation, her eyes narrowed. It was as though she realized the situation wasn't playing out the way she had expected. She had hoped for some reaction. Maybe she wanted to provoke him into a shouting match. Instead, the black man's calmness seemed to mock her more than anything else. The silence between them grew deafening, and the longer it went on, the more uncomfortable the other shoppers became. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the man spoke. His voice was steady, his tone calm, but the words that followed were like a punch to the gut. He didn't raise his voice or shout. Instead, he delivered his response with precision, each word sharp and clear, cutting through the tension like a knife. "I've been dealing with people like you my whole life," he said. "But you're not worth my time." At first, the woman looked stunned. Her smirk faltered for the briefest moment as the weight of his words sank in. But she quickly recovered, trying to brush it off as if she hadn't been caught off guard. The moment wasn't over, though. The man wasn't done yet. His next words hit even harder. "You think your ignorance makes you better than me, but all it does is show your weakness. You want to say I don't belong here. Maybe it's you who doesn't belong anywhere." The woman, now visibly shaken, couldn't find a response. She opened her mouth, trying to think of something to say, but the words wouldn't come. Her face reddened, and for the first time she looked vulnerable, exposed. The audience around them, the bystanders who had been avoiding the situation, now stood frozen, taking in the full impact of his words. The store, for a brief moment, seemed to hold its breath. No one could have expected what happened next. The woman stood there completely speechless while the black man calmly finished his transaction. His response, quiet but powerful, left her without a retort, her racist comments now hanging in the air like a failed weapon. As he walked away, the store seemed to exhale a collective sigh of relief. The man had stood up for himself, but in a way no one had anticipated. His words weren't just a defense of his dignity. They were a statement to everyone who had witnessed the encounter. Racism had no place here, and the silent strength of his response had taken away the woman's power. What the woman hadn't realized was that her attempt to belittle him had instead exposed her own weakness, and it was clear to everyone who the real winner in this encounter was. The moment of reckoning had finally arrived. The store had become a tense battleground, the atmosphere thick with anticipation. The white woman, once so sure of her words, now found herself caught off guard. Her attempt to belittle the black man had failed miserably. She stood there, her smug expression faltering as the weight of his response sank in. In the silence that followed his words, there was an undeniable shift. The black man had not raised his voice, nor had he made any grand gestures. It wasn't about physical confrontation. It was about using the power of calm and conviction to deflate the woman's cruel attempt at dominance. His response wasn't just a defense of his own dignity. It was a masterful display of control. The woman, who had expected her insult to provoke a defensive or aggressive reaction, was now left standing speechless, exposed. She was suddenly aware of the eyes of everyone around her, and it was clear that she had lost. The power dynamic had shifted completely. The black man hadn't just shut her down with words, he had done so in such a way that no one could deny the strength of his character. He wasn't playing into her game, and in that moment it was clear who was in control of the situation. As she stood there fumbling for a response, the black man took a step forward, leaving her to wallow in the aftermath of her own arrogance. He didn't need to say another word, his silent exit spoke volumes. There was no need for a final confrontation, no need for a drawn-out argument. The powerful message was clear. Her words were meaningless, and she had no power over him. For the people in the store who had been silently observing the effect was almost surreal. They had witnessed a moment of profound justice, one where an individual stood up not with anger but with strength and self-respect. The black man had not allowed her to dictate the terms of the interaction. He had remained calm, composed, and in control of his emotions. And in doing so, he had taken away her ability to further insult him. The woman's face flushed red, the realization of her defeat sinking in. She glanced around, likely searching for someone to back her up, but no one was willing to side with her. The other shoppers had seen through her charade, and they weren't interested in supporting her hatred. The black man's words had pierced through the veil of her entitlement and ignorance, and there was no denying the power of what had just unfolded. In the span of just a few moments, the woman's racism had been exposed for what it truly was: weakness, not strength. And it was clear that the black man, despite the insult, had emerged victorious in a way that would resonate long after the incident was over. His ability to remain calm, his quiet yet powerful response, had left everyone in the store with a deep sense of respect for him. As he walked away, the atmosphere in the store seemed to shift. The air felt lighter, as if the oppressive weight of racism had been momentarily lifted. The woman's voice had been silenced, not by force, but by the sheer strength of a man who refused to let hate define him. And in that moment, the crowd knew they had just witnessed something powerful, something that would stay with them for a long time. The aftermath of the confrontation was just as telling as the moment itself. As the black man finished his transaction and walked away, the woman stood frozen, unable to speak. The smugness that had once adorned her face was now replaced with embarrassment and defeat. She had underestimated the man, thinking her racism would intimidate him into submission. Instead, it had only exposed her own ignorance. The onlookers in the store, who had been waiting for the situation to escalate, were left in stunned silence. No one expected the black man to handle the situation with such quiet strength and dignity. His calm response had turned the tables, showing that sometimes the best way to deal with hatred is not with anger or violence, but with poise and self-assurance. For the woman, the shame of her actions was now undeniable. The respect the man had earned from the bystanders was palpable. His words had resonated with everyone in the store, and the message was clear. Racism, no matter how casually or overtly expressed, would not be tolerated. As the black man left the store, it wasn't just a victory for him, it was a lesson for everyone who witnessed it. In the face of hate, choosing peace and strength over confrontation was the ultimate act of defiance. If this story shocked you, don't forget to subscribe for more powerful moments like this. This is not a real story. This story is only for educational and entertainment purposes.